I'm Senior Product Manager for Developer Relations on the Apollo team. And today I'll spend about an hour or so kind of giving an overview of Apollo, building a couple applications. We'll actually do Hello World again, go in a little more detail, and then looking at a lot of examples. And then we have about an hour. So if you have questions as we're going through, feel free to ask them. And we can take them actually during the session. And I'll make sure to keep things moving along. So is everyone in the keynote this morning? Everyone there? Okay. Everyone have fun? Okay. Cool. So some of this is going to go over this. I'm actually going a little more detail. But just really quickly, what is Apollo? So Apollo is the code name for a new project we're working on. It's not the final name, but it's a code name for a project that aims to create a cross-operating system runtime that allows web developers to leverage their existing web development skills. So that includes technologies like Flash and Flex and HTML, JavaScript. But to leverage those skills to build and deploy web applications, rich internet applications, rich content to the desktop. The main thing I want to point out is, again, Apollo isn't just about Flash and Flex. So if you're an HTML developer, or if you're a CF developer doing a lot of HTML development, HTML is the first-class citizen within Apollo. So I'm going to actually show an example. We showed this earlier in the keynote, so I'll show it really quickly today. But this is a fine-tune application. I'm going to do something a little different, which I didn't show this morning. Let me close Firefox. So I've actually uninstalled the fine-tune application on my Mac, so I actually don't have it on my computer. And I'm going to show the installation process with the current alpha, actually, how you download and run an application. So I'm at the fine-tune desktop page. This is kind of their landing page for their Apollo application. And switch over, go to fine-tune first. Okay. So fine-tune is an online, it's kind of like an online personalized radio station service. So basically you can create your own playlist or say, oh, I like this particular band, and they'll create kind of a little mini radio station for you based on what other users like, and the same thing, people who like, say, Interpol, and they like other artists, and they'll recommend that you kind of a customized music player. Really cool. It's a website, so you can go in here and maintain your playlist and tag songs and interact with other users, but it's not necessarily the best place for a song player, right? You may be coding for a couple hours. This is in your browser. If you're like me, you have tons of tabs open, or maybe you crash your browser every now and then debugging some stuff, and then you lose your playlist. So is what they've done. The way they solve this problem is they've actually built an Apollo-based application that complements their website and their web-based application. So let's actually install that. So I'm on this page. I'm just going to click download. It's going to take just a second. So you see it's fine-tune desktop.air. It's actually going to download the AIR file to my desktop. Now an AIR file is you can think of it as a cross-operating system application installer package format, if that's a long enough description. And basically it's a zip-based format that includes everything for your application, so the icons and the app files. And then the Apollo runtime can actually take that. So let's actually open this up. So the Apollo runtime can take this file. If I double-click it, it'll actually start an install process. Right? So I can actually then take this and at install time, turn it into a native application. So in this case, I'm on a Mac. I could send this exact same file over to a Windows machine, and the Windows user can install it also. I'm going to click install. Right now, for the current alpha that's out on labs, you can't choose where it gets installed to. It does some default things. Eventually, the user will be able to specify where they want it installed, assuming they have the system level privileges to do that. So I'm going to click install, and I'm actually not going to run it just yet. So the application's installed on my desktop now. Let's actually switch over to the Finder and look in here. There's my really big icons. And you can see here now we have fine-tune desktop APP. So APP is just an application on Mac. But this isn't like some special wrapper or you know, some shortcut to bootstrap everything. This is actually a native application now that includes fine-tune. So I'm going to launch that. Now, one of the advantages of this is that as far as the OS is concerned, it's just another application. So things like, you know, I can launch it however I want, and you know, I can use Quicksilver to switch to it. So let's see if it's in here. Yeah, there it is. Fine-tune. Bring it up. It runs under its own process. So if, you know, if Fine-Tune app crashes, it's not going to bring down any of my other Apollo applications. So it's a first-class application. It's just, at this point, it's just another application on your desktop. So you can interact with it and work with it in the same way you do any other application. So let's actually go over to Fine-Tune now.
Question.
Yeah. This question.
Does that mean you could distribute the application as standalone without the Apollo runtime?
So the question is, does that mean you could you take that app file and distribute it without the Apollo runtime? And the answer is no, because is what the actual runtime, which is about 5 to 6 megs right now, isn't in that app file. The runtime is installed on the system. And when the app runs, all the code for the app's there, but it's calling into the runtime installed on the system. So if the user had Apollo, the runtime installed, you could do that. You could distribute just that file. Probably a better solution would be, we're going to allow you can distribute air files, which work if the user has the runtime already installed. But let's say they don't have it installed. Well, like early on, you know, it'll take some time for the runtime to get out there. But you also be able to create native installers. We'll have tools that do that for you, not in this current alpha. But it'll allow you to create a native installer that can first check to see if they have Apollo, and if they don't, it'll install it. Then it'll install your application. So it should solve at least that problem. So let's see. So now I'm in Fine-Tune on the website again, and let's click some cold play, and you can see now their web-based browser knows about the desktop application, or the web-based player knows about the desktop player, and it's giving me a choice of where I want to play. So the Apollo application can, in the web page or the web app-based application, they can communicate with each other. This is Sandbox. It's using local connection, so I can't just talk to any arbitrary web page, or any arbitrary web page can't talk to my application. But in this case, they know about each other, give each other permission. So they'll be able to communicate with each other. So let's actually, I'll say, play this in external player. I'll switch over to Fine-Tune, and you see Fine-Tune starts playing it. So this is nice now because I can close my browser and my music's still playing. Now, one of the things that's cool about Fine-Tune, but just in general, I'm really excited about Apollo, is Apollo, it's running on the desktop, right? So it's running, it doesn't have a lot of the limitations of running in the browsers, it's running in a different security context. So it can do things like, load all my iTunes files and look what songs I like. So in this case, Fine-Tune is looking at my iTunes library, and it sees, the songs I have in there. And let's say I want to listen to some Beastie Boys. But the thing I think is really neat about this is now you can treat some of this local data as just another web API. Whereas before, if I wanted to do this, I'd have to select this file, and these files can get pretty big, sometimes 12 megs for iTunes, upload it to the server, and then if I change the file, I have to re-upload it and sync it up. But now with Apollo, because it's based on web-based technologies, you can still load all the data from online. It's really easy to do that, load web APIs, but you can also kind of treat your desktop as another API and mash up some of your local data with some of these web data online. And my connection clicked out there a little. So that's just a quick example. I really like the Fine-Tune application because one, I use it all the time now. But also I think it's really a really good example of an Apollo application that really complements an existing web application and website. And the goal of Apollo is not to replace the browser or replace applications in the browser, but really because you're using the same technologies to build the web content, the browser-based content, as you do in Apollo, it can really complement each other. And I think this is a good example of how they can offer a better experience by running outside of the browser while still integrating well with their existing web-based content. So how are applications, Apollo applications built? There's two primary application technologies. The first is Flash-based, and we actually fine-tuned the Flash-based application that's based on Flash Player 9. And so you get ActionScript 3, the new Tamarind virtual machine, all the performance goodness, everything that Flash Player 9 provides. That also includes Flex 2 based content can run on top of that. The second primary application technology is HTML. So HTML is a first-class citizen within Apollo. And that includes HTML, JavaScript, CSS, AJAX techniques, pretty much everything you'd expect in a modern HTML rendering engine. Now, Flash content can contain HTML. HTML content can contain Flash. And then any of those combinations can leverage PDF. Although PDF support is not in the current alpha. It'll be out in a future release.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Won't take rendering again on the sense that, for example, we had an ASP site, and we report and read the HTML from that.
Yeah. So the question was, can it render dynamic HTML? I guess is that yes. So there's we actually look at this a little more in a minute, but it's pretty much it's just a rendering engine. So I can either give it a string of HTML, I can give it a local HTML file maybe that's included with my application, or I can tell it to go load a remote URL and say, hey, load and render this HTML. So the HTML engine, we use WebKit. It's an open source rendering engine. It's used by KHTML and KDE. And it's also used by Safari on Macs. We looked at, spent a lot of time trying to figure out what was going to be our HTML story within Apollo, especially early on. And we ended up choosing WebKit after looking at a number of criteria. The first is that we wanted an open project that we could contribute back to. Right? We didn't want to build our own from scratch and maintain it over time. It's a lot of work. So we wanted a project that we could take bug fixes from, we could submit back to, and pretty much kind of strengthen that project. We also wanted a technology that developers were familiar with. We didn't want to create a new technology, a new rendering engine that has its own little quirks and bugs. If you've done complex HTML development, DHTML development, you know what I'm talking about. It works in one browser, and as soon as you go to test in the next browser, it doesn't work. And then you go test in another browser. So we didn't want to add another testing matrix to that. So our goal is if it works in Safari on Mac, it's gonna work exactly the same in Apollo. One thing for the alpha to keep in mind is we're actually working on a little newer build of WebKit. So you may actually see some things that don't work in Apollo anymore that work in Safari, but I think you'll find when the next version of Safari comes out, then they'll be back in sync again. So just something to keep in mind. The last 2 points are actually the most important. One, we wanted a code base that would have a minimal impact on the runtime size. So our goal is between 5 and 9 megs for the runtime. We're actually about 5.5 megs right now, and that's with most of the code in there, as far as the player and WebKit are in there now. So WebKit has a very good code base. It was really easy for us to work with it. It had a minimal impact on the runtime size. And then the last point was a little more forward-looking, but we wanted something that we're confident we could bring to mobile devices. So Apollo 1.0 is really a cross-desktop runtime, but looking into the medium to long term, we really see it as a cross-desktop, cross-device runtime. And at the time we made the decision, Nokia had already ported WebKit to run on their Series 60s phone. And actually, since we made the decision, of course, Apple's gotten it to run on their iPhone, which will be out in a couple of months. So let's look at another example really quickly. To actually show this in Keynote, so I'll just show it really quickly. This is an application called Fresh that some HTML JavaScript developers on our team built. And basically, this is an application built entirely in HTML and JavaScript and CSS. There's no Flash or Flex here. It's top-level HTML application. It's actually, it kind of blew me away when I first saw it. I was like, wow, I didn't even think you could, build this level of application in here so quickly. They did it within about a week and a half. And what they did, they actually used some existing toolkits, especially the Yahoo UI toolkit, which you can download for free. But it works, like you'd expect. What is this? So I can bring in, different feeds. So here's actually my weblog. I can view them. It's actually pulling in the RSS feeds. I could refresh it. I could view it in a new tab. And this is actually rendering HTML within HTML. And not in the way that you traditionally think. They're actually instantiating HTML control, low-level HTML within it. But it's a pretty full-featured RSS aggregator, but built entirely in HTML and JavaScript. This is just an example of a top-level HTML application and the type of applications you can build at the level of complexity. Now, one advantage they have when building this is that they were building this as an Apollo application, so they didn't have to worry if it runs in Firefox or IE. Right? They can really take advantage of the platform and not kind of dumb it down to the lowest common denominator, because in this case, they're just targeting the Apollo runtime.
Is your code available on the web?
If it's not available, it's going to be very soon. I saw some emails. I'm a little behind on my emails at work right now, but it'll be up within. It should be up within the next couple of days if it's not already up there. And I'll post the URL where you can get all this and find more information. Yeah.
Was that Fresh?
Yeah, that application is called Fresh.
Yeah, it's up there.
So it is up there. So the code's up there. Thanks. Yeah, so you can go download that, play around with it. Yeah. Right, so in this application, I'm not sure if they put in offline support yet, but in general, they're probably, well, heck, let's find out. Let's see if it works here. Okay, so let me actually disconnect my, oops, not disconnect that. Works offline and off screen also. There we go. Come on, you can do it. There we go. Okay, so I'm offline now. Oh wait, hold on, let me turn off my wireless. Okay, so now I'm offline, right? Actually, I'll restart it too. Let's see. Okay. There we go. So now let's see. You can look at my feed. All right, so you see it's actually working online. Now if I try to go to the URL, right, so I can look at the feed, right, bring it down here, but now if I try to view it in a new tab, that's not going to work because they haven't gone through and pulled all the websites offline. But you can see in this case, they're bringing the content offline, storing it up for offline use. Yeah, there's a question over there? Oh, okay, yeah, no problem. So let's see if I can get my wireless back in here. In general, though, Apollo have APIs to make this easier to take your content offline, and as well as APIs to let you know when you're on and offline or where you've lost connectivity to a specific server or service. A lot of those APIs aren't implemented in the first alpha, but you can kind of do it on your own, doing a little lower level, but we'll provide APIs to make that easier. Yeah.
Will the offline application know when the server connectivity is gone ahead and made it?
Yep, a new version of the application. So the question is, can your application know when there's a new version of it, right? And the answer is yes. We have in Alpha 1, we actually have a pretty low-level update API. So your application can go and see if there's a new version. If there is, it can update itself. And actually, if you install Fine-Tune, they fix bugs pretty fast. And you'll see it every now and then. It's like, oh, there's a new version, and then they'll update it. So yeah, so there's a low-level update API right now. And again, in the next release, we'll have a little higher level to make it even easier to use. Cool. So I'll show you another application really quickly. This one's called Maptacular. Now this is using HTML, but this is a top-level Flash application that's actually integrating HTML inside of it. Let's see if I... There we go. Cool. And so, oh, there we go. So it's loading in. And actually, this is, again, a Flex-based application. Right now, most of the UI is Google Maps, which is slowly loading in. But, it's everything works. It's a fairly complex JavaScript HTML application, works as you'd expect. But then if I mouse over here, it actually is parsing V cards or address book cards on my system and bring them into here, and then I can do something like, and this is Flex now, this little drawer is Flex. You can see it overlays the HTML right here. Right? You see some slight transparency. So we're not just overlaying the HTML. The HTML is actually rendered via the Flash display list. So anything you can do to say a JPEG or bitmap in Flash, you can do to HTML also. So in this case, let's just drag this in. So I'm dragging from the Flex to the HTML content, and it's going to go and actually map that the address book, the vCard from my local system into Google Maps now. It's a little slow loading. But again, this is just a simple example of leveraging HTML within a Flex-based application. So this is a top-level Flex application. Okay. Cool. So just really quickly, I'm not going to go over all of these, but Apollo, you build your applications on top of Apollo, and you don't have to worry about which operating system you're running on. And then we provide APIs. For the first release, we provide a certain set. As we go further along, more releases, there'll be more APIs. We'll expose more functionality. The main ones, at least up here, is File I/O, Full File I/O API, Full Network Stack, and you do actually do a lot more than you can do in the player. So you don't have to worry as much about cross-domain issues. You have access to all the HTTP headers and methods, so you have a little more flexibility there. You also have the ability to customize what your application looks like, so you have complete control over the application Chrome. And that's just some of the APIs. That's not all of them. Yeah.
What if an application requires some user input, data input, for instance, and it was offline? How does that
right.
deal with it?
So the question is, what if the user is entering data and my application's offline? So, well, today, like in the alpha, you could write some code that saves it. When you go back online, you can sync it up with the server. In probably the next release, the next pre-1.0 release, we'll have some of that API level for you to make that easier.
So if you had to look up a type, drop-down list, look up tables and things like that, it would sort of packages that with the application. So if they're offline, they still get the drop-down list.
Yes.
With lookups and things.
Yeah. So you can make your application, again, you can sync data offline for it to work offline, and you can queue up that data changes so when you go back online. In the Alpha 1, those APIs aren't there. You can actually write them yourself. They're not too difficult, but we'll actually write those for you in a future release just to make it a little easier. So one thing that's really important, we actually touched on this a little earlier, is an Apollo application is just another native application, right? And so it works like you'd expect a native application to work. And so like your mom, when she's running your my first Apollo application, she shouldn't need to know anything about Apollo. It's just going to work like any other application works. So this is something we spent a lot of time with. We call these desktop integration, desktop touch points. So how you uninstall applications, or where shortcuts get placed, or tying into system level notifications, drag and drop, and copy and paste. That stuff will all work as we expect. Drag and drop clipboard notifications aren't in the current alpha. They'll actually be in 1.0, and some of them will be in the next pre-release beta. So scripting support. So Apollo applications have kind of two primary technologies, right? They have Flash-based and HTML-based. So you have two scripting languages. So if you're working in Flash-based content, you're going to be programming in ActionScript 3. And if you're working in HTML-based content, you're going to be programming in JavaScript. Now you can imagine over time that these languages are kind of moving close together. ActionScript 3 is based on the next ECMAScript version. So you can imagine eventually there'll be a unified language for them. So that won't be in 1.0. But because all of this technology, WebKit and Flash Player, are integrated at a very, very low level, those technologies can work with each, or those scripting environments are integrated at a very low level. So that means something like I could have Flash content that has HTML in it, and that Flash content can go in and walk the HTML DOM, right? Maybe it can dynamically manipulate the DOM using JavaScript APIs. Some JavaScript code can call some ActionScript functions or use some of the ActionScript APIs. So maybe I want to use the drawing APIs from JavaScript, right? And one thing that I think actually the coolest thing about this is because we integrate on the SO level is that we actually don't serialize the data back and forth. Like if you use an external interface in the browser, we serialize it as a copy. It's a little messy, it can be slow. But in Apollo, this is all just the same code underneath. And so it's not serialized, we just pass the references back and forth. So when you say call a function from, call a JavaScript function from ActionScript and pass it, say, an object instance, you're passing it by reference, not by copy. So then you can manipulate it in JavaScript, and those changes will be reflected in ActionScript. So just something to keep in mind, you're actually passing by reference now. Yeah.
Is it going to be
The question was, is it going to be, can you, I don't understand. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So the question is, will Flex Builder have support for HTML development in Apollo apps? Yeah. So the next version of Flex Builder is, again, focused on Flex Builder, or on Flex content. If you want to do, the idea is if you're doing HTML-based development, there's already a lot of really good tools to do that. Now we provide command line tools to make it easy to do that development, say Dreamweaver, or if you pull in an Eclipse plugin for doing this type. But Flex Builder itself is going to stay focused on Flex development. So let me, yeah.
Extension to that question then, is there any plan to be able to compile directly from Dreamweaver the way you currently would from Flex Builder?
Yeah, so yes, or I shouldn't say that. I'm supposed to be more vague. Maybe. I guess I kind of blew it though. So. When it releases, it won't because we're on different time cycles, but we're on the Dreamweaver and the Flash CS3 team, so they'll have support. So you can author applications directly. For Dreamweaver, it's actually a little bit easier because we have command line tools. So you just use Dreamweaver to write up your code, whatever, and then you use the command line tools to test it and debug it and things. For Flash, we have to. It's a little more involved because there's some compilations online. But yeah, we'll release support for doing that directly from some of our other authoring tools. So just going to show this really quickly. You can actually download this from Labs. This application Christian Cantrell did called Scout. And is what it does, let me load this. It's a Flex-based application. So everything's programmed in ActionScript. But you see here we have HTML content up here. And if he hasn't released the source code for this, someone can check while I'm talking. It'll be out soon enough. But basically from ActionScript, he's reaching into the HTML and getting tons of information. But the APIs he's using, he's actually using JavaScript APIs that you'd use in the browser, right? To walk the DOM and say get all the links and things. So you can see here's the HTML tree as it's constructed. Actually, the DOM's a little more interesting. So you can see he's actually walked the DOM and showing it. Let's see. Let me find if I can. Here we go. Oh, let me find something interesting to look at.
This is an Apollo app.
Yeah, this is an Apollo app. Okay, there we go. So you see here, like it's walked the DOM, it's found the the Google trademark right here. You can actually highlight it. You see how it highlights it? What he actually did there was he went and rewrote the node around this to tell it to have a border. So he's actually, from ActionScript, he's going in and dynamically manipulating the HTML DOM. And then I can actually do something like this, like you can start sending Google, all the advertisers can send their checks, right? So now I actually went in and rewrote that node from ActionScript.